Welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. Today our guest is Dee Borgoyn. Dee is a trainer, a speaker, and an author who's worked in people-related services for many years. She now trains leaders in healthcare how to be more compassionate. Dee believes that each of us has unique gifts and strengths. We were born to stand out and be special. And when I asked Dee to submit her bio, she put a little smiley face at the end because we really should think of ourselves as being able to stand out and be special. Dee, we're so excited to have you on the show today and hear your message on compassion. Let me hand you the virtual microphone and the stage is yours.
Okay. My message, of course, is on compassion primarily. I have spent years working with people who are challenged and people of all ages. And I feel that compassion is a key. And I'll touch on that. What I want to start with is telling you a little bit about my background. I am disabled from birth. I have one hand. I like to say I don't just have one hand, I have one hand. So it's not a just.
Right.
Growing up, I think I grew up in the Air Force and we moved around a lot. So I not only was disabled to be different, I was also the new kid. And I look back now from my being 62 years old, and I spent so much time trying to be someone different than who I was. I spent so much time looking at other people and trying to fit in that I look back now and I wish I hadn't done that so much. I have spent a good part of my life because of that trying to figure out who I am. And I bet there's a lot of people that are 50 or 60 that would say that. I think that people who are in their teens, in their early 20s or whatever, the sooner the better, start thinking less about how you compare to other people and constantly thinking how you can be like them. There may be something that you espouse to be, that they are, to create as part of you, but it's not about fitting in. It's not about being like someone else. It's not about what's wrong with you. And spending too much time on what your weaknesses are so you can fix them so you can be better. If people could concentrate as early as possible more on what is special about them, what their strengths are, what is unique about them that they bring to the world, there's no one else like you. No one else. There's, I don't know, billions and billions of people in the world right now, and there have been billions of people over time, but there's never been in all that time two identical people, ever. That's just mind-boggling. What do people do now? They go, it's mind-boggling to think that, even if you're an identical twin. There have never been two people identical. So what you bring is something that only you can bring. Something that the combination of everything you are is unique, and that's what you bring to the world. That's your gift. I think that, I heard a word the other day that I asked my granddaughter about. I know sometimes when people are younger, they get labels attached to them. You're lazy, you're stuck up, you're stupid. And the newest word I heard that I had to call my granddaughter and say, is this really a word? My 15-year-old granddaughter said, yes, actually it is. And she lives in Reno. I live in Virginia. So I wanted to see how far this had gotten. The word to me is crushing. It's that person's irrelevant. Oh, very relevant. That's the new word for like square or not important. That's the word they're using now. And she had confirmed for me that that is a word. I broke my heart to hear that anybody would call another person irrelevant, because no one is. So wanted to throw that out there in case people are hearing that word, that's a really crushing, unvalidating word for people. The time that when you're in your teens and your early 20s, that's such an exciting time for finding out who you are and learning who you are. The finding new experiences, that's how you grow who you are. I had an experience once. I was always very shy and very timid about trying new things. Some of the things that I've learned and grown through have been accidents. For example, once when I was in my teens, I went to a ski shop with a friend of mine. and I accidentally picked up a brochure that was titled, How to Tell Your Parents You Want to Learn to Ski. Now, I had never even considered that I wanted to learn to ski, because that's something that, of course, I could never do, right? I could never ski with one hand, and I'm not coordinated, I'm not athletic. But I took it home and I laid it on my, somewhere in the house, and my parents bought me some skis, some cheap little skis that they got at a swap meet or something. And I didn't have the heart to tell them that was an accident, so I did learn to ski. There's so many things that happen like that in our life that we grow through and we learn who we are through, that I think people could concentrate on grasping those opportunities. And I think we can find what our dreams are by pursuing those things. So back to compassion. I wish that over my life I had been more compassionate with myself, that I hadn't been so hard on myself all these years, that I guess I looked at other people and thought they were perfect or had it all together, or somehow they were not as insecure as I was, or shy as I was, or they just seemed, all of them seemed better. I wish I had had more compassion and been as kind and gentle with myself as I would be with a really good friend. I wish I had done that. So that's one of my wishes. And I also wish that I had had the guts to stick up for and be more compassionate with others that I saw that could have used me sticking up for them in the moment. There's a commercial on TV that I just love. If people want to look it up, it's great. It's where a girl in a cafeteria sees a boy who goes to sit down at a table, and the boys give him the go away look. So he's standing there with no one to come to sit with, and she looks at her friends and says, "Hold my pouch." And she hands them her Capri Sun, and then she goes over and she rearranges all the tables so that it's one big table instead of all these separate tables. And I think actually there's some t-shirts out there that say, "Hold my pouch." My granddaughter's one. I called her when I first saw that, and I said, "You know what, honey, you are one of those, you would be the kid in the cafeteria that would say, 'Hold my pouch,' and go take care of things." I wish I had been as brave as I am now to go out and stick up for people. I think my last point is what the world needs now in terms of young people and people of all ages actually, is a term I heard recently called solutionaries. And those are people who are problem solvers, who have a good work ethic, and who are resilient. Those three things. People who come with a solution rather than being a problem or making the problem worse. So that could apply to any age. I think change needs to happen in your own heart, then with your friends and your family, and then within your community. But it all starts with you. And young people, the world is your oyster right now. You have all the opportunities in the world to learn who you are, and then you can bring that to the world. I just feel so strongly about that. I get excited. I wish I could start over.
Well, Dee, I think despite not being able to start over, it's encouraging to see what you are doing. And even, as you age, that you're still setting big goals and making a difference in the world, whether it's through writing a book, talking about compassion, or being on programs like this and sharing your message. Certainly you're making a difference. I want to ask you a few questions just about your message. It's one of those things where we don't talk about it enough. And I think part of the reason we don't talk about caring and compassion is because if we're good at it, it doesn't show up on a test score. If we're good at it, it doesn't help us make more money or become more famous or anything like that. And so compassion has to be one of those things that we just decide we want it to be part of our life. Do you think that by virtue of you not having a hand, you were more drawn to thinking about those kinds of things and reaching out to others and thinking about caring and compassion just because you were maybe more attuned to what you didn't have?
I think that might be a good something to notice. I also had I was always different, and I've always been a people observer. So I do watch what goes on between people and learn from that. I also had I have a younger brother who was learning disabled, and I'm the oldest of the family. He didn't learn to speak till he was older than he should have been, but I, as the older sister, learned to interpret what he was saying and speak for him. So I think that's a big part of my going into special education and then going into human resources and then going into healthcare, is wanting to speak for other people. It's interesting what you say about it being something that compassion is a hard thing to wrap your head around. And when I titled my book 28 Ways of Compassion, it's 28 specific things that you can do. It's like in a workbook format that you build this habit. But people I talked to, the feedback I got was, don't say that word compassion, because people are going to roll their eyes. My engineer husband said, don't call it that. And there's that pushback that it's a soft skill. It's not something you put on a resume. But this research is showing that compassionate leaders and people who are compassionate, meaning, and I could have called my book this very easily, 28 Ways of Connection. Compassion and connection are very, very closely related. The people who can do that are successful, and businesses that build compassion into their culture, and maybe they call it something else because compassion gets the eye roll, are more successful in terms of retaining employees, making customers happier. People who are compassionate with themselves are healthier. We see a lot, if any of your people are planning on going into healthcare, it's a high burnout field. Mm-hmm. But people who have learned self-compassion and learned how to be compassionate with themselves, which you have to be before you can be compassionate with others, last. And they don't burn out because they know how to balance the two. But it is a very soft, squishy, mushy, like love. Now, what's love got to do with it, right?
Exactly, and everything is the answer.
Right, exactly.
Dee, I'm going to ask you in a minute, I'm going to ask you to share 2 or 3 of your ways of compassion that you mentioned in your book that work especially well for a youth audience. But while you're doing that, I wanted to share a quick story just because I was thinking about what you mentioned with the dangers of comparison. When it comes to comparing, that's one of the things that makes it difficult to have compassion for others, is if we're focused on the comparison instead of focused on the love, as you mentioned. So the story I wanted to share about that, I have a rule in our home that you can only speak about people behind their back if it's a positive thing. So I encourage my kids, talk about people behind their back all the time, because that means that we're hearing good things, and we want to hear things that encourage and uplift us. And so when I was in high school, and even younger, in elementary school, I got caught up in comparison. And it was a very destructive thing for me because I was a relatively good kid, but I wasn't particularly great at sports or school or art or anything. I was pretty average at pretty much everything. And it was frustrating to me because I had one friend in particular who was amazingly good at everything he did. He was an awesome musician. He was the captain of every sports team. He ended up being the valedictorian and the student body officer at our high school. Everything he touched turned to gold. And when I was young, I struggled with this because he was a good friend of mine and I admired him, but I was jealous. And that jealousy held me back. What I didn't know then that I do know now is I shouldn't have worried about what he was doing. I should have worried about myself. And the reason I say that is now I am raising, his name was Joe. And now I am raising a Joe. In fact, my oldest son, Eli, his middle name is Joseph, and he was named after this friend. And the reason I love this friend so much is he didn't compare. He hung out with anyone in the school. He was friends with everybody. He inspired others. He just did his best. And what I realize now that I didn't realize then is the reason Joe was great at everything is because he worked really hard. He wasn't just naturally gifted, but he had an
Yeah.
incredible work ethic, and he reached out to others. And what you're saying here, as far as compassion concerns, that it really is about connection. And Joe made it a priority to reach out to others, to uplift them. And in so doing, he got better at stuff. And so I'm seeing that now with my oldest son, who's an amazing kid, but he doesn't get caught up in comparisons. It's how can I help others? And then he's growing along the way. So just wanted to put that out there, but I'm interested. You
Yeah.
know at least 28 ways of compassion. I want to hear a few of them.
Okay, I love that you were focusing on the connection, because again, people who learn how to connect properly are successful, and you just did that. One is be where you are. I was on a mountaintop once, off in the islands somewhere, and I was thinking about work, and I caught myself. I was laughing at myself, and I said to myself, gosh, it's beautiful here. Wish I was here, because I realized I wasn't where I was. And I think so much people can't be compassionate in the moment because they aren't present in the moment. Right. They're somewhere else. They're thinking of the future. They're thinking, and this is so true for me, everyone's looking at me. So that's all they're thinking about. When, I'm sorry, but they're not. They're thinking the same thing maybe about them. The second thing that's really important in compassion is that hopefully you can recognize what some of your assumptions are, but put aside your assumptions about someone. And what you just said is so true. We look at people on the outside, and sometimes I've heard this expression, we compare our outside or our inside with their outside. So we're feeling all these things inside, and we look at them, and because they look okay on the outside, we think that they're better than us. And then we find out that they're looking at us and having these assumptions. Like when I was so shy in high school, I had a friend one day tell me, after she'd known me for about a year, people think you're really stuck up, that you think you're better than other people, which was absolutely not true. One of the third things I think people could do and start right now is when you have a moment, if you're out in public, or if you think about someone that you know and care about, and you think to yourself, I should smile at that person, or I should send that person a note, or I really should call that person. Do it. Do it. Because we have so many of those all day long where we have a great thought, but compassion without action is not compassion. It's an action. Any communication that we have, any conversation that we have on the phone, people we see in public, people really, really need compassion right now. And you never know what that one smile will do for somebody. Or a quick phone call to your grandmother. or a hug. It doesn't have to. In business, they said to me, oh, we don't have time to be compassionate. That's right. One of my biggest arguments I get. Oh, it's so time consuming to give somebody a smile, or pick up the phone and say, how are you doing today? And really listen and really mean it. So know that compassion is an action word. It's not a feeling, it's an event.
Yeah, I love that. And when it comes to action, we think that it takes longer, but that's because we live in a society that's very egotistical, right? Very self-centered. Mm-hmm. And when we reach out to others, we'll find that often we'll do things or say things that will ultimately make our lives easier. Just as a case in point, this morning, I was going on a walk with my wife, and we were out in the country on this little dirt road, and we had a huge windstorm yesterday. In fact, it blew part of the siding off our house. We were up on ladders and screwing things back in. It was a really big storm. Well, this morning when we went out on our walk, a tree had fallen down across the road and was blocking a main part of the road. Now, because we were walking, we could easily walk around it, but the cars wouldn't be able to. And so we could have just walked by, but we decided, it's not going to take us long. Let's at least move enough off the road that cars can get by. Well, I guarantee you, had we not stopped to do that, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, as we're inconvenienced walking around the tree, we'd be like, we should have just moved it. It
We
wouldn't
should have
take
just
that
done that.
long.
Right.
And I think the same can be said for compassion. Those little things when we feel like, oh, we should say something, we should call our grandma, we should do whatever it is.
Right.
Those things usually don't take very long at all. It's going to take you 30
No.
seconds, a minute, maybe 10 minutes. But if you don't do it, it's going to bug you for hours or days or months. So just do it.
Exactly. Just do it. And it's so needed right now. When I talk to people about what I do and in the book, the first thing I hear is it's so needed right now. And it happens one person to one person. It doesn't happen because of parades or legislation or any of those things. It happens between two people. We all love each other. We're hardwired to love each other.
Right.
We really are. Science has proven it.
Now, I want to shift gears here just for a second, Dee.
Okay.
I think it's awesome that you wrote your book, 28 Ways of Compassion, or is that right? 28 Ways of Compassion?
Yes, that's right.
But that's not the full title. The rest of it has something to do with healthcare. Now,
Yes.
I want to talk on that for a minute because I think this is fascinating. The 28 Ways of Compassion, that applies to everyone. And you could have just left it at that and just had a book about compassion. But
Yes.
you specifically targeted it to healthcare, your industry that you've been in, which is a very smart thing to do from as a branding standpoint, to establish yourself as an expert in that area. And I would guess, I don't know, but I would guess that it has opened doors for you within your industry because you have a book in that area.
Yes.
With kids today, as they're looking at going into any particular industry, I think this is a really good thing to think about is how can I stay in that industry and add value, even if that value would work in other areas? How can I stay in this industry? When you wrote your book, was that a very conscious decision to say, I'm going to do this specifically for healthcare, or did it just end up that way?
I think it's a reflection of the amount of experience I have specifically in healthcare and human resources. Even going further than that, my niche is elder care. I have 15, probably 20 years of experience in elder care, senior living, long-term care, nursing homes. I, as an HR professional, have told young people for decades, if you want a career that is recession-proof, that you can take any discipline that you want to work in, and there's a spot for you in healthcare. Because if you want to be in finance, if you want to be in human resources, if you want to be a hands-on person, if you want to be in facilities and environmental services, if you want to be in dining services, every single profession is represented in healthcare. And it's so important. The senior population is booming. The number of people to take care of them is shrinking. So the gap is growing exponentially. And I can't think of a more rewarding field than working with elders and seniors, but in any healthcare field. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be a doctor. I think the three most important people in a hospital or a nursing home are the very frontline people, the certified nursing assistants, the dining services workers, and the housekeepers. And the reason the book says relationship-centric on it is because, especially in nursing homes and long-term care, the care is very relationship-oriented in a way that no other. If you work in dining in a restaurant, you may see some of the same people several times, but you're not with them every single day for 8 hours a day. So it's very relationship oriented, which is why I wrote the book we need to put the compassion in those relationships, and we need to give people permission to be compassionate. Right. We spend a lot of time, all my life I've been told, oh, don't make it personal, don't bring personal into work, but we need it badly if it's appropriate.
Right. Well, and the truth is, you mentioned that I don't know if there's a better industry than working with the elderly. And I would counter to that, there's at least one, because I'm in it,
Okay.
talking to you
Yes.
and being a teacher. But the comparisons there, I know we're trying to avoid comparison, but,
Yeah.
but in thinking about these professions, you know, healthcare and human resources has a high dropout rate, has a high attrition rate.
Yes.
Education
Yes.
and teaching has the same thing. And I think part of the reason for that is these are industries where you go into it expecting to serve, expecting to give of yourself. And often as
Yes.
kids, we look at those professions and absolutely plan for that. And if you want to be a healthcare worker, if you want to be an educator, it's a rewarding, a wonderful profession. But I think a lot of times people drop out because they realize that they're going to be underpaid, underappreciated, undervalued.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
hard to reconcile those things when you have to support a family, when you have to pay the bills. And so
That is true.
my advice to you kids out there, if you're looking at going into healthcare or looking at going into education, is be thinking, just as Dee has done, how will you establish yourself as an expert in that industry so that you will be more valuable, so you will be better compensated? It makes a difference. Would you agree with that, Dee? Do you think that that's an important thing?
I would agree. I think that there are people who come into, for example, healthcare, and they're happy being, and this is the truth, a housekeeper for 20 years, 30 years. That's just who they are. But there's also so much room for people who come in through that opening on the front lines and then get trained and get more experience, and they grow in that, and they become maybe a lead housekeeper, and then a supervisor, and then a manager, and then an environmental services manager over all of the facilities. And then maybe they get some training and they become a certified financial officer, or a chief financial officer, or an administrator. There's plenty of room for growth, and that allows more opportunity for these new people to come in. I love the teaching field. I've been thinking about going back in there, and then I think, well, you know, they're probably, I'm not tech savvy enough, but those are my two things, are youth and the elderly. So it's kind of a little sandwich.
Yeah, no, I think it's perfect. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Dee, to share this message of compassion. Never have we needed it more than we need it today. I really appreciate your time. Yeah. If, you know, final piece of advice to kids and how to have compassion in their life, what's your final word for them?
I think having compassion for yourself, treating yourself gently, is the first place to start. Because if you can't learn how to do that with yourself, then you can't share it with other people. And don't be so hard on yourself. Don't judge yourself so much. Don't compare yourself to others. Look at yourself through really, really loving eyes, through the eyes of someone who really loves you, and then take that to other people.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Dee. Wonderful
Thank
advice.
You, Tyler.
Thanks for being on.
Thank you. Have a great day, or make a great day.